Welcome to Mrs. E English Skills. I'm Mrs. E and today we're looking at AQA GCSE English Language, Paper 1, Question 5, Descriptive and Narrative Writing. So where does this fit in the assessment? Well, here's a look at Paper 1, and this question is Section B Writing, and it is one extended writing question worth 40 marks, and you get 24 marks for content and 16 marks for technical accuracy. But what do I mean by content and technical accuracy? Let's look at content first. So, content and organisation is essentially the communication. Is it effective? Is it imaginative? Is it the right tone? Basically, is it an engaging story or an engaging piece of description? Do I want to read on? Am I gripped in some way? An organisation is, have you used paragraphing well? Have you thought about a logical order for your story or your piece of description? Have you thought about your sentence structure and how that communicates the information that you're giving? Whereas technical accuracy is all about your sentence structure, punctuation, grammar, spelling, your use and range of vocabulary. This is all very important, as you can see from this piece taken from a mark scheme. This constitutes 20% of the marks. So it's important that you do proofread, save time to proofread your piece of writing to get rid of silly errors such as sentence structure, spelling or punctuation, and to double check that your tense is correct, for example, and the words that you've chosen are the most effective words to help your story or to really engage your piece of description. So what's the difference between narrative and descriptive writing? Narrative writing is when you tell a story in such a way that the audience learns a lesson or gains insight. And an example question could be, write a story about a game that goes badly wrong. Whereas descriptive writing requires you to describe a person, object or event so vividly that the reader feels like they could reach out and touch it. And an example question could be, write a description suggested by this picture. And then there will be a picture of a scene of some sort, and you will use that as inspiration for your description. So let's look at some tips to ensure that you write an effective narrative and get the most marks possible. Number 1, tell a story from memory, especially if it's a memory that means a lot, as this will make it easy for you to remember and to tell the story in an interesting way. Number 2, get right to the action. You do not have time to build up to an event, so think about this story as a snapshot in time rather than a beginning, middle and end. Number 3, make sure your story has a point. Something needs to happen to disturb the status quo. Just a general diary entry of what you did that day is not going to be enough to engage an audience. And number 4, use all 5 of your senses to describe the setting, characters and the plot of your story. Don't be afraid to tell the story in your own voice, as nobody wants to read a story that sounds like a textbook. It's important, although this isn't a descriptive essay, to still describe in detail to ensure that your audience becomes part of your story. But what about the descriptive essay? It's not a story, it's just a description, a piece of description to ensure that something, a person, place, thing, event, is so vivid that the reader can touch it, as described earlier on. So how can we write vivid descriptions? Well, we need to make use of a variety of descriptive language features. The next slide is a reminder of these features shown when we were looking at Paper 1, Question 2. So let's look at these language features, starting with descriptive language features. So when you think of descriptive language features, I want you to think a soap, Sam, alliteration, similes, onomatopoeia, adjectives, personification, senses, adverbs, and metaphors. So let's start to look at language devices, starting with imagery. And imagery just means when you're able to picture what's being described. So we'll start off with simile, which is a figure of speech that expresses a resemblance between different things, using the words like or as. For example, as cold as snow. Here, the writer wants you to think about snow and imagine how cold that feels and apply that to whatever it is they are describing. It emphasizes the description, and that's a useful technique in order to really allow your reader to visualize and imagine that scene. Next, we have metaphor, which is a figure of speech comparing one thing to another by saying it is that other thing. So it's not like the other thing, like a simile, it is the other thing. For example, you are driving me up the wall. You're not literally driving me in a car up a wall, but this is trying to suggest that you are really annoying me, you're making me mad, you're making me angry, you're getting on my nerves. But it's obviously a much more descriptive and effective way of suggesting that, and it's making the reader think about what it means and actively taking an interest in reading the piece of text. Then finally, using the senses. So we're looking at your 5 senses here. So the writer could be describing what you can hear, see, smell, taste and touch. For example, the smoke was thick and black as it rose from the earth, accompanied by the stench of scorched wood. So you get the full rounded experience. Not only can you see what's happening, the smoke thick and black and what it looks like, but you can smell that stench. So scorched wood, if you've ever smelt scorched wood, which you more than likely have, the writer wants you to imagine that smell and it to flood your senses as you're reading the text and you become enveloped in that scene. Let's look at some more descriptive devices, starting with onomatopoeia. I remember it as onomatopoeia to help me spell it, but it's a word that sounds like the sound you're describing. So examples are slap, pop, hiss. And what this does, it allows your reader to hear the scene as well as see the scene. So it employs the sense of hearing. Next we have alliteration, where we have 2 or more words close together in the sentence that begin with the same letter. For example, decaying daffodils danced in the distance. This can emphasize a description, as it does for this example, or it can add a rhythm in order to make whatever's being stated memorable, which is very useful in advertisements. Next we have personification, and the clue is in the title, personification, person, and it's when we describe something that is not a person as if it were. For example, daffodils danced, and as the car crept forward, its engine whimpered in despair. We as humans, as people, can identify with dancing and creeping and all the emotions that go with that. We can also identify with why someone would whimper and the emotion of despair. and this helps us understand the meaning in the text and therefore become, again, enveloped in the story. Lastly, we have the two word classes. So we have adjectives, words that describe the noun. A noun is a person, place or thing. And my example is the enormous yellow bus. So enormous and yellow are our adjectives and they describe the bus, which is our noun. And adverbs are words that describe the verb. A verb is a doing word or an action word. If you've seen my videos on sentence structure, you'll know this already, but if not, check out my basic English skills playlist to upskill in this area. Every video in that playlist is useful for GCSE English language and will really help you prepare for these exams. So an example or two examples of adverbs we have: I walked slowly down the road and he laughed wickedly at the children. So slowly and wickedly are our adverbs and walked and laughed are our verbs. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out the other videos in this playlist in order to prepare yourself effectively for your AQA GCSE English language exams. If you've got a question, just add it in the comments section and I'll answer as best I can. And don't forget to subscribe in order to allow me to make more videos to continue to help people with their English skills. I'm Mrs. E and I'll see you soon.